This is the story of how my brother became the golden child. He got my fiancée pregnant, and our parents chose him over me. 4 years later, they lost everything because of their precious son and came crawling back, begging for help. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's video, I need your support. We've noticed the channel isn't growing as fast, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and it lets us keep delivering great content. Your support means a lot, so let's keep growing this channel together. Thanks so much, and now let's get into the video. Hey Reddit, I never imagined I'd be the type to share my personal life here, but I'm at my breaking point, and I need to vent. I've always known that my brother Kyle, 20, male, was the golden child. Even when we were kids, it was clear. My parents, especially my mom, always treated him differently. If his block tower fell over and he cried, Mom would comfort him for an hour, telling him he was sensitive and needed extra care. Me? I was told to stop being a baby and clean up my mess. I learned early that the rules were different for him and me. Kyle was always special in their eyes. My mom said it was because he was sensitive, and my dad had dreams of him becoming a doctor. For my dad, I think it was about reliving his own dreams through Kyle. Dad had always wanted to be a doctor, but never made it through college. Kyle was his second chance. Meanwhile, I was just Michael. I wasn't special or sensitive. I was the kid who got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and didn't ask for much. I didn't need coddling like Kyle, so I got ignored. It didn't really hit me how deep it went until high school. I earned a full scholarship to study computer science, and I thought, finally, this is something they'll be proud of. Who wouldn't be happy about their kid getting a full ride to college, right? When I told my parents, I remember it clearly. I was standing in the kitchen holding the letter, and my mom glanced at it, nodded, and said, "That's nice, honey. Can you help Kyle with his med school applications later?" That was it. No celebration, no recognition for all my hard work. Kyle, on the other hand, was in high school too, barely scraping by with C's in biology, but you'd think he cured cancer the way my mom praised him. It wasn't just academics. Everything in my life felt insignificant compared to Kyle's. For example, when I started dating Ashley in my senior year, I was head over heels for her. She was my first serious relationship, and she was amazing. Ashley had this calming presence, and she was practical and smart. She worked part-time at a salon while finishing high school and was always focused on saving for the future. But my parents didn't care. They didn't want to meet her. When Thanksgiving came that year, I asked if Ashley could join us. Mom literally said, "It's just high school puppy love. Don't make it a big deal." That hurt. I wanted my parents to see her, to understand why I cared about her. But no, Ashley wasn't important enough. Meanwhile, every single one of Kyle's girlfriends was treated like royalty. They were always invited to family dinners, served slices of homemade pie, and my parents would gush over them like they were already part of the family. I remember one dinner when Mom was asking Kyle's girlfriend about her career dreams and aspirations. I just sat there wondering, where was that enthusiasm for Ashley? Still, Ashley and I made it work. I went to college on my scholarship while she stayed behind, working at the salon and saving money. We made long-distance work for 2 years, with weekend video calls and visits when we could. It wasn't easy, but we were building something. When I proposed to Ashley last summer, it felt like all the struggles had been worth it. We were in a small park near her apartment, and I'd saved up to buy her a simple but beautiful ring. She cried when I asked, and we both laughed through our tears because we were so happy. For the first time, I felt like my life was finally moving forward. To my surprise, after I proposed, my parents actually seemed to accept Ashley. It was like a switch flipped in my mom's mind. Suddenly, Ashley was part of the family. Mom even started asking her about wedding plans and what kind of dress she wanted. At the time, I thought this was a sign that my parents were finally seeing me, not just Kyle. I should have known better. When Thanksgiving came around again, I was excited. I had plans to tell my family about the wedding and start talking about the future, maybe even show them how well I was doing at school and with my internship. It felt like everything was finally falling into place for me. Then I got the text. It was from Ashley, out of nowhere. Need to talk. Starbucks. Urgent. My stomach sank, but I tried to ignore it. I figured she was just stressed about the wedding. When I walked into that Starbucks, I'll never forget how she looked. Ashley was sitting at a corner table, holding a coffee cup with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She wouldn't look up at me. I sat down, and before I could even ask what was wrong, she blurted it out. "I'm pregnant. It's Kyle's." Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I thought I must have misheard her. I asked her to repeat it, hoping I'd heard wrong. But no. She said it again. She started crying, trying to explain. She told me it happened over the summer when Kyle kept showing up at the salon, talking about how far away I was and how lonely she must have been. She said she didn't even know how it started, but it just happened. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't mean for it to go that far. I didn't yell. I didn't get angry, I just sat there staring at her. After a minute I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I didn't say a word. I just left. I don't remember much of the drive back home after Ashley dropped that bomb at Starbucks. It felt like my mind had disconnected from my body. The radio was playing something, probably one of those overplayed pop songs, but it was just noise. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just felt empty. By the time I reached my parents' house, it was dark outside. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment staring at the porch light. It felt surreal, like I was about to step into a dream where nothing made sense. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face Kyle or my parents, but I needed answers. The moment I walked into the house, I saw him. Kyle was sitting on the couch, head down, shoulders hunched. That was his usual stance, head down like a kid who'd been caught stealing cookies. My mom was hovering around him, patting his back and handing him tissues. She wasn't crying, but she looked concerned, as if Kyle were the one suffering. My dad stood by the window with his arms crossed, saying nothing. He seemed to be avoiding the entire situation. The tension in the room was suffocating. It felt like everyone had been waiting for me, like I was the last piece of a very broken puzzle. "What the hell is going on?" I asked. My voice was quieter than I'd intended, but it still broke the silence. My mom was the first to speak. "Michael, let's sit down and talk about this calmly." The word calmly immediately set me off. I didn't want calm. I wanted answers. I wanted to know how my fiancée, the woman I had planned to spend my life with, ended up pregnant by my brother. "Don't tell me to be calm," I snapped, looking directly at Kyle. "You're the one who should be talking. Say something." Kyle didn't look up. He just mumbled something into his chest. "What?" I repeated, louder this time. "Speak up!" My mom jumped in, almost as if she were defending him. "He's taking responsibility for his actions, Michael. This is a big step for him. He's going to be a father." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A big step? You want me to congratulate him for this? He can't even pass a basic biology class, and now you think he's ready to be a parent?" I looked at my dad, who was still staring out the window like none of this mattered to him. "You have nothing to say, Dad?" Finally, my dad turned toward me, sighing as if I were the problem here. "They're young. Mistakes happen, Michael. If you really love Ashley, you need to let her go. They're having a baby." "Let her go?" I repeated, feeling the anger rise inside me. "Your son sleeps with my fiancée, and I'm supposed to just hand her over like it's no big deal?" "Don't talk like that," my mom snapped. "This is a blessing, Michael." "A blessing?" I interrupted her. "A sign that your precious son can't take responsibility for anything? Am I just supposed to keep rolling over and accepting it?" Mom's expression hardened. "Kyle made a mistake, but he's doing the right thing now. He's stepping up, and we need to support him as a family." As a family. That phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. It was in that moment I realized that I wasn't really part of their family. I was just the backup kid, the one who did everything right but was never as important as Kyle. I looked back at Kyle, who still hadn't said a word, not even a fake apology. He couldn't even lift his head. "You know what?" I said, my voice shaking. "Fine. If you want to support him, you can. I'm done. I'm letting all of you go." My mom looked shocked. "Michael, don't say things you don't mean." "No, I mean it," I replied. "You've made your choice. It's him. It's always been him." I turned around and walked straight to my room. I could hear my mom following me, still trying to talk me down, but I didn't care. I grabbed a suitcase from my closet and started throwing things in it: clothes, my laptop, books. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped a few things, but I didn't stop. "Michael, you're being rash," Mom said from the doorway. "This is your family." I turned to look at her, and for the first time, I didn't care what she thought. "No," I said. "You're his family. You stopped being mine a long time ago." She looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't feel bad. Not anymore. By the time I finished packing, my dad had appeared as well. He stood next to my mom, his face set in the same disappointed expression he always wore when I didn't do what he wanted. "You're overreacting," he said. "Overreacting?" I repeated. "Your son slept with my fiancée and I'm overreacting?" I pushed past them both, dragging my suitcase to the car. Neither of them tried to stop me. I think they thought I'd cool off and come back, but I knew better. This was it. I drove back to campus that night. It was a 3-hour drive, and I spent the entire time in silence. I didn't even play music. When I got back to my dorm, I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. The next morning, I changed my phone number. I deleted all my social media accounts and made new ones. I blocked my parents, Kyle and Ashley. Every photo I had with her went straight into the trash. I didn't even look at them. I couldn't. Over the next few weeks, my friends noticed I was acting strange. They asked about the wedding, and all I'd say was, "It's off. I don't want to talk about it." That was enough to silence them. The only person I stayed in touch with was Aunt Mary. She sent me a message a week later. "I heard what happened. I'm with you, nephew. They'll regret this someday, trust me." At that time, I didn't care if they regretted it. I just wanted to disappear. The days after I cut off my family felt like I was floating in some kind of strange limbo. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't really anything. I just went through the motions, woke up, attended class, and stayed up late at night, staring at my laptop screen until I was too exhausted to think. I had made absolutely sure they couldn't reach me. But apparently, she had figured out a way. I got a message from Aunt Mary, who admitted, "Please listen to me. We need your help. Things have been difficult." That word, difficult, felt like an understatement, but I didn't respond. I just sat there, gripping my phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I should have hung up right there, but I couldn't. I'm not sure why. Maybe I just wanted to hear her out, or some foolish part of me was curious about what they wanted. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice flat and colder than I intended, but I didn't care. Mom let out a shaky breath, and her words spilled out as if she could no longer keep them in. "We're in trouble, Michael. Your father's health isn't good. He's been to the hospital twice this year for his heart, and we've had to sell the house to cover Kyle's mistakes." "Kyle's mistakes?" I repeated. I knew I shouldn't have asked, but I couldn't help myself. She hesitated for a moment before blurting it all out. Apparently, Kyle had borrowed $40,000 for some business opportunity a friend had pitched him. My mom didn't say what the opportunity was, probably because she didn't know or didn't want to admit how ridiculous it sounded. Anyway, the business failed within a month, and Kyle couldn't repay the loan. My parents stepped in, dipping into their retirement savings to bail him out. That, combined with some of Dad's medical bills, forced them to sell the house. They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, and of course Kyle moved with them. Where else would he go? "Michael, we don't have anything left," Mom said, her voice thin, like she was holding back tears. "Kyle is trying. He's been looking for work." I interrupted, unable to contain my anger. "Mom, he's 24 years old. He's a grown man. Why are you still cleaning up his messes?" "Because we're his parents," she snapped, as if that explained everything. Then her voice softened again. "Michael, we need you. We need your help." I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "Why should I help you?" I asked. "You made it clear 4 years ago where I stood in this family." "That's not fair," she replied quickly. "We didn't know what to do back then. Kyle made a mistake, but he's trying now."
"Trying? You mean he's still living off you?" I said, as I always had.
There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. "Please, Michael," she said at last. "Your father's health is bad, and I don't know what we'll do. We have nothing left." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment I imagined what they must look like now. Dad, gray and hunched over, staring out the window of some cramped apartment. Mom pacing the room, wringing her hands. Kyle sitting on the couch, head down, just like that night 4 years ago. It was almost too easy to picture, but I didn't feel sorry for them. Not really. I felt tired, like this was the inevitable result of the choices they had made. "You chose him," I said quietly. "You had a choice and you chose Kyle. Now you're living with it." "Michael!" she started, but I cut her off. "I have nothing to give you. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up before she could say another word. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down on the kitchen table, staring at it for a long time. I half expected her to call back, but she didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch in the dark, replaying the conversation over and over in my head. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself they were just facing the consequences of their actions. But no matter how many times I tried to convince myself, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. It wasn't guilt. I didn't feel sorry for them. But hearing my mom's voice, hearing how desperate she sounded, stirred something in me that I didn't want to deal with. The next day I called Aunt Mary. "Figured you'd call me," she said, her voice light as she sipped coffee on the other end of the line. "Your mom said she was going to reach out. She got my number from you." "I asked," I said, trying to sound annoyed but failing. "Relax, kid," Aunt Mary replied. "I didn't give it to her. She must have dug it up some other way. You know your mom, she doesn't give up easily." I sighed and rubbed my face. "How bad is it, Aunt Mary? Really?" She let out a slow breath. "It's bad, Michael. Your dad's heart isn't what it used to be, and they're flat broke. Kyle, well, you know Kyle. He's still waiting for life to hand him something on a silver platter. Your parents are barely scraping by, and your mom doesn't know how to deal with any of it." "She shouldn't have to deal with it," I said bitterly. "Kyle should." "Yeah, well," Aunt Mary replied, "some people never grow up." We talked a little while longer, and when I hung up, I felt drained. Aunt Mary never sugarcoated anything, and I appreciated that. But hearing about the mess my parents had made of their lives just made me feel more distant from them. I had spent the last 4 years building a life for myself, a life they had nothing to do with. And now they wanted me to come back and fix everything. I wasn't going to do it. I couldn't. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work even more than before. My company was growing, and we were about to roll out a major update to our software, so I had plenty to keep me distracted. I told myself I was fine. My parents weren't my responsibility, and I didn't owe them anything. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and my mind had nowhere to go, I kept hearing my mom's voice. "We need your help." It didn't take long for Aunt Mary to fill me in on the details my mom hadn't mentioned. After that call, I texted Aunt Mary every now and then, not because I wanted to know about them, but because curiosity had a way of gnawing at you when you tried to ignore it. I guess I wanted to know how bad things had gotten, like peeking at a car wreck on the side of the road. A week after the call, Aunt Mary sent me an email. About 3 months after that phone call, Aunt Mary sent me another email, and this one hit harder than the rest. "Your dad had another hospital visit, his heart again. He's stable now, but it scared your mom half to death. She won't say it out loud, but I think she knows she's out of options." I sat there staring at my phone for a long time after I read it. My dad had always been the kind of man who seemed invincible when I was a kid. Even though he wasn't particularly warm or affectionate, there was a stability about him. The thought of him being sick, frail even, felt strange. But I didn't reach out. I couldn't. About a month later, Aunt Mary called. It wasn't like her to call. She usually just sent texts or emails, so I knew something was wrong. I picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Aunt Mary," I said. "What's up?" She sighed on the other end. "Your parents are in worse shape than I thought." "What now?" I asked. "Your mom lost her job," she said. "They're living on scraps now. Your dad can't work because of his health, and Kyle, well, you know him. He's still at home, unemployed, sitting on his ass while they scrape together rent money." I didn't say anything. What was I supposed to say? "Michael," Aunt Mary said after a pause, "they're desperate. Your mom won't admit it to me, but I can tell. She keeps asking if I've talked to you, dropping little hints. I think she's hoping you'll come riding in to save the day." "They're not my problem," I said quietly. "I know," Aunt Mary replied, "but she doesn't see it that way." We sat in silence for a few seconds before she added, "I'm not telling you this to guilt you, Michael. I just thought you should know." "Thanks for letting me know," I said. "You doing okay for yourself?" she added. "Don't let them pull you back into their mess." "I won't," I said, and I meant it. Around that time, I got curious enough to look Kyle up online. I hadn't checked on him in years. Blocked accounts, no mutual friends, nothing. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened a private browser and typed his name into Facebook. His profile was still public. His last post was from a few weeks ago, a photo of him sitting on my parents' couch wearing sweatpants, holding a video game controller. The caption read, "Taking it easy. Life's short, you know." The comments made me cringe. His old friends were still hyping him up. "You deserve a break, man. You'll get there soon, bro." I closed the tab, disgusted. How could he still have people cheering him on when he'd done nothing with his life? Meanwhile, my parents were sacrificing everything just to keep him afloat. I thought about sending Aunt Mary a screenshot, but I didn't. There was no point. A few months later, the company I worked for closed a major deal, and the payout I received as part of my equity share was enough to set me up for years. I celebrated with some co-workers, had a nice dinner, and then went home to my quiet apartment. That night, I sat on my couch thinking about how far I'd come. I had everything I'd worked for, freedom, stability, a career I was proud of. But no matter how far I got, part of me still carried the weight of my family. I didn't miss them exactly. I missed the idea of a family that would have been proud of me, supported me, and chosen me when it mattered. But that wasn't the family I had. That night, I wrote Aunt Mary a message. "Thanks for everything you've done for me these past few years. I don't know where I'd be without your support. I hope you're doing okay. Let me know if you ever need anything." She replied almost immediately. "Proud of you, Michael. Keep building your life. I'll be okay. At some point, you have to stop looking back. You have to let go of the idea that things could have been different." My parents made their choices, Kyle made his, and I made mine. I didn't owe them anything. It had been almost 5 years since I walked away from my family, but sometimes it still felt like yesterday. The mess, the betrayal, the night I packed my things and left. Those memories stayed with me, not because I hadn't healed, but because they shaped who I became. By now, my life looked nothing like it had back then. My company had grown far beyond what I'd imagined. We weren't a scrappy startup anymore. We were a real player in cybersecurity. I was in a position where I could do whatever I wanted with my time. I traveled when I felt like it, invested in new projects, and worked on ideas I cared about. My house, a sleek, quiet space I bought a year ago, felt like a sanctuary. I didn't need much to be happy. Peace and stability were enough, but no matter how good my life got, there were still moments when my past tried to catch up with me. One of those moments came on a random Thursday evening. I was finishing up work for the day when I received a message request on Facebook. I didn't use Facebook much anymore, but I still checked it out of habit. The message was from Kyle. I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether I even wanted to open it. Part of me said to just ignore it, delete it, and move on, but my curiosity won in the end, and I clicked on it. His message was brief. "Hey, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm trying to fix things. I messed up and I'm sorry for everything. Mom and Dad aren't doing well, just thought you should know." I read the words for a long time. "I'm sorry for everything." That's how he started. After all these years, that's how he began. An apology that was probably 5 years too late. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That night I lay in bed thinking about my brother. Kyle had always been the one I resented the most. Not because of what he did with Ashley, but because of everything else. The way my parents raised him, how they handed him everything without question, how he took and took and took, never giving anything back. It wasn't just Kyle who let me down. It was my parents, too. They had shaped him into the person he became, and now they were paying the price. But that wasn't my issue anymore. The next morning, Aunt Mary called. She didn't usually call unless it was serious, so I answered right away. "Michael, it's your dad," she said, her voice softer than usual, like she was bracing for my reaction. "He had another heart episode. It's bad this time. They don't think he's going to recover." I sat down at my kitchen table, the words sinking in. I didn't know what to say. "Your mom's a mess," Aunt Mary continued. "She's not handling it well. And Kyle. Well, you know Kyle." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What did she want me to do?" "She hasn't said anything," Aunt Mary replied, "but you know her. I think she's hoping you'll show up, that you'll be there." For a moment I thought about it. I thought about going back, sitting by my dad's side, seeing my mom, seeing Kyle. Maybe they would look at me differently this time. Maybe they would regret how they treated me. But then I realized that wasn't what I wanted. I wasn't looking for closure. I wasn't looking for them to apologize. I'd made peace with all of that a long time ago. "I'm sorry to hear about Dad," I said finally, "but I'm not coming back, Aunt Mary. I can't." She didn't try to argue with me. "I figured as much," she said. "You've done what you needed to do, Michael. Don't feel guilty for it." "I don't," I replied, and I meant it. "My father passed away a week later. Aunt Mary emailed me to let me know. She told me there was a small funeral, mostly family and a few neighbors. Kyle was there, of course, standing next to my mom like nothing had changed. I didn't go. I thought about it, but in the end, I decided that showing up would only make things worse. I had nothing to say to them, and I didn't want to pretend otherwise. My father was gone, and whatever I could have said to him had been left unsaid years ago. Instead, I spent that day working in my office, finishing a new project I had been working on. I didn't tell anyone at work what had happened. It was just another day, and honestly, I preferred it that way. A few months later, I heard from Aunt Mary again. This time, it was about my mom. "She's not doing well, Michael," she told me over the phone. "Losing your dad hit her hard. And Kyle, well, Kyle is still Kyle. He's living with her, but he's not helping. She's struggling to keep up with the bills." I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. "And what does she want me to do?" "She hasn't asked for anything," Aunt Mary said quickly. "I'm just telling you because I thought you should know. You don't owe her anything, Michael. You've already done enough." I appreciated that about Aunt Mary. She never tried to guilt me or push me into doing something I didn't want to do. She just told me the truth and let me decide what to do with it. "I'll think about it," I said, even though I already knew what my answer would be. In the end, I never reached out to my mom. I thought about it a few times, especially after Aunt Mary's updates, but every time I did, I remembered how things had been. I remembered how I felt sitting in that living room while my parents defended Kyle. I remembered how they looked at me like I was the problem. Some people say family is everything, but I don't believe that. Family is only everything if they treat you like you matter. If they don't, then you're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to put yourself first. That's what I did. Years later, I was still building my life, still moving forward. I had a home, a career, and friends who felt more like family than my blood ever had. I didn't hate my parents or Kyle anymore. I didn't feel angry or bitter. If anything, I felt free. Sometimes, freedom doesn't come from winning. It comes from walking away.